So what we've got here is the top side of beef. Now before you start your competition, again as always you should have a clear block, nice and tidy, the tools at hand of what you're going to use for the job, and trays for your fat and gristles and lean trims. Also, before you start doing any butchery to the piece of meat that's been given to you, it's always advisable to check the piece over, external side and internal side, for any bruises, deep slashes that may have been like that one there, that's happened in the factory. You don't want to be blamed in competition for doing that. So if you do find anything untoward, bring that to the judge's attention before you start. Otherwise you will be penalised for doing that. The judge will think you've done it. I need now to break this down. We're looking for 1, 2, 3 main muscles and a small group of minor muscles. So we're going to work our way down through the primal. I'm going to start on the underside first. So as with everything we do, I'm looking to grade as I go along as well. So if meat is on the top, I shall take meat off first, then is silver gristle, then is fat. So I'm always working down. I don't want to be trimming pieces off and then have to trim the pieces. So it's working in a methodical order as we go. So here we've got little bits of lean muscle. So if I can take those off first, I don't have to revisit for further trimming on these bits. As I say, we trim as we go along, so I may have 2 or 3 different grades of trim. So if it's very fine for mince, I want to separate that from larger muscles. That's probably ideal for dice or stir fry. I don't want just a great big pile of trim in one tray. I want to show the judges that I'm actually separating everything for its finished use. Now I can take some of the thick heavy gristle that is lying there. So again, just using the flat of the knife to run across the top of the meat. So my silvers, important that we keep gristles separated from the fat. And then the majority now is going to be our fat. So I can start working way down, trimming out any fat as we go. So rather than keep turning this muscle over all the while, I'm just working in a methodical order of cleaning one side first before working on the other. We're taking care not to bed into the meat, taking off too much meat as we go, and not leaving scoops on the meat surface. The judges want to see a nice smooth surface, no ragged edges or digs. Right, at this point I'm happy to leave it like that, because around the edges are where the muscles are defined. So I'm going to turn this over and work on the other side. So the aim now is to remove the external fat, and most of this fat is lying on a silver membrane. So the judges will be looking for a separation of the fat and the connective tissue, not just cutting all this off in one piece. Now at this point we are coming to the edge of the first muscle we want to remove, the cap muscle, but we'll still continue taking the fat off from the remainder. So if we just look now, that majority of the fat has been removed, mainly thin silver connective tissues. There will be fat coming under this muscle, but we'll remove that as we go. So at this point I could remove this muscle off the main top side, but I want to use the weight of the block. So I'm going to leave it attached and clean the top of this muscle first before taking it off. So So again, it's using the point of the knife just to go under the connective tissue and just skinning it off nice and easily. Just running the knife over, make it smooth, so if the judges are around, all they're seeing is a nice smooth surface. And then when we're happy that we've cleared as much as we can from the top of that muscle, we can now start and lift that up. And we're going to work our way underneath the muscle, and we're going to peel it back off the main block underneath. So I'm trying to keep as much of the fat on the underside of the muscle. This will get easier as we come further and further down the seam. So we're moving fairly quickly, but we just take a little bit of care that we don't cut into the muscle I'm removing or the muscle lying underneath. Now this is where we start and pick up a couple of other muscles. So we've got the cap muscle, and we've got a thin, long muscle and a bulbous group underneath. We're going to take these off all in one go. It's just easier to do that way. So there's our main center block of the top side. This is our cap with the thin muscle and the large bulbous muscle in the center. So we're going to treat these as three separate pieces. So again, trimming as I go. I'm going to remove the thin, long muscle first. So the judges will be looking for these individual muscles to be laid out cleanly at the end of the exercise. Even though they may only be used for dice, they still want to see them fully trimmed and prepared and seamed out as individual muscles. So there's our nice little thin muscle. Both sides you can see there's fat and gristle. It's trimming as we go. There is a vein also that runs along there. That needs to come out. It's easy to lay the muscle out and check rather than working it with it all bunched up. So we can see that we're cleaning that surface around. A little bit of silver there, and then we check the other side. Now you will find a couple of small little muscles, so again we need just to trim them as we go. Don't forget, judges may come and go through your fat as you're working or at the end. So be aware of what you're putting in your tray, that you don't have to do any further work to it. So all the time just going over everything to make sure we've removed all the connective fat and tissue. So what we need to do now is just remove this main core block. That is our main little core of muscle. And now what we have left, topside cap. So again, it's just making sure we just finish off the connective tissue and fat. So we're looking at totally denuding this muscle of connective tissue. So it's a matter of getting it all nice and clean. You trim to the edge, but don't be tempted to square the edge off. The judges will be looking for natural shape of that muscle. Just a final check to make sure you've removed everything. There's nothing untowards, so that is our cap muscle. And we take our main block, top side again, just a little wipe around. Judges can see the table's nice and clean. What we need to do now is just clean the surface of the top side and then break this down into the last two remaining muscles. So again, before separating it into two muscles, it's easier to clean the surface before we start. So again, using the weight of the meat to help us. So you can see underneath some of the fat, there is the silver gristles. And this is where we'll be picking up a seam for separating these last two muscle blocks. So what we need to do now is to follow our last seam and just following down the seam gently, You're scraping down a very fine muscle sheath. So I'm just using the tip of the blade to follow that seam through. You're just following that carefully through, which will separate our abductor or bullet muscle away from our center cut of topside. And last little bit of trim on the big block. And again, we're not looking to dig in and tunnel, we're just looking at surface trimming. Final check, just making sure we've removed everything, any ragged edge on the underside. And that is our main topside block. And then just to finish off, the bullet muscle will remove most of that vein, but we're not looking to tunnel in to that muscle block. A little bit silver. Final check, and that gives us our topside of beef into our 3 main muscle blocks and the 2 smaller muscles to go with it. So that is our topside of beef seamed into the 5 main muscles.